There's one version of Titanic we have never seen until this morning.
That's right. Experts have used special technology to map the entire ship on the ocean floor and create its digital twin.
More than a century after the Titanic sank nearly 4,000 meters beneath the Atlantic, cutting-edge technology has unveiled shocking secrets hidden in the deep.
Nobody had been to the Titanic then for 14 years. I never dreamt we'd have an ability to literally look around the site to find out what happened, or we will find out because the journey's beginning now, to find out what happened on that fateful night, but also the details of the personal stories. You know, we can actually tell from the wreck.
What if everything we thought we knew about that tragic night, how the ship broke apart, how the flooding happened, and who truly saved lives, was wrong? These stunning new findings don't just reshape history. They resurrect forgotten acts of heroism buried in darkness for over 110 years. This isn't just a story about wreckage on the ocean floor. It's a forensic investigation that rewrites the final moments of the Titanic. Rethinking Titanic's breakup. For over a century, the popular image of Titanic's sinking has been fixed in our minds. The great ship snapping in two with a thunderous crack, the bow plunging downwards, while the stern rose dramatically before collapsing. It's a gripping cinematic scene repeated in countless films and documentaries. But what if this portrayal misses the mark? New scientific analysis reveals the breakup was not a single shocking event, but a prolonged, violent process that unfolded over several minutes. This dramatic revision comes from the most advanced three-dimensional scans ever made of Titanic's remains, lying nearly 4,000 meters under the North Atlantic. The wreck's condition challenges long-held beliefs, showing a ship that tore itself apart slowly under intense structural stress, twisting, bending, and folding rather than breaking cleanly. It's a story of structural disintegration, not a neat fracture. This shift in understanding changes not only the how, but also the why of Titanic's destruction. The new evidence hints that the collapse started near the ship's midpoint, around the third funnel, where expansion joints designed for wave flexing were pushed beyond their limits. The keel twisted, plates began to separate, and decks ripped loose one by one. It wasn't a sudden line of breakage, but a cascade of failures spreading across the hull. Instead of a snap, the ship slowly gave way under impossible forces. Survivor accounts that once seemed unreliable now take on new weight. Witnesses described hearing explosions, likely boilers bursting or compartments collapsing, and seeing the ship's lights flicker out in stages. They even spoke of the stern briefly righting itself before its final plunge. For decades, these stories were dismissed as shock-induced fantasy. The scans vindicate those accounts, presenting a grim yet precise picture of Titanic's final agony. This re-evaluation invites us to reconsider everything about the last moments aboard Titanic. If the ship's destruction was a drawn-out, torturous process, the human drama played out against even more harrowing circumstances. Structural failure and human courage intertwined in ways deeper and more complex than we imagined. The scene set by new findings is one of relentless strain, pushing the ship beyond endurance. What remains clear is that Titanic's breakup was unlike anything engineers expected or designed for. The ship was enormous, heavily reinforced, and meant to withstand extreme challenges, yet the forces unleashed by flooding and shifting weight exceeded all calculations. It was a catastrophic failure, the kind that happens when strength meets limits unseen until too late. As the ship's bow sank beneath the waves and pulled downwards, the stern rose skyward, placing unimaginable tension on the fragile middle. This imbalance overwhelmed structural reinforcements and caused the ship to contort painfully as it separated. The breakup was a slow-motion tragedy, a violent deformation under crushing forces. The wreckage between bow and stern reveals a story told in thousands of scattered artifacts and twisted steel plates. Each piece marks part of the unfolding destruction, holding clues to the timing and sequence of failure. Mapping this debris field became vital in reconstructing Titanic's final moments, not as myth but as forensic fact. The tragedy, once viewed as a singular event, now unfolds as a meticulous sequence of catastrophic failures, each layer deepening the complexity of the story. These findings reshape our understanding, confirming the intricacy of Titanic's demise and the unfathomable forces at play. Understanding the nature of Titanic's breakup sets the stage to re-examine the wreck site itself, separated now for decades into distinct sections, each telling a unique part of the sinking story. The Titanic wreck site. Titanic's wreck rests about 3,800 meters below the North Atlantic, roughly 370 miles southeast of Newfoundland. Discovered in 1985 by Robert Ballard and his team, the ship lies broken into two main sections lying approximately 600 meters apart. These are the bow and the stern, separated by a massive debris field that spreads across nearly 5 kilometers of ocean floor. The bow lies relatively upright on the seabed, tilted slightly to the port side. It remains remarkably intact, preserving features like the anchors, railings, and parts of the bridge structure. This section offers a haunting glimpse into the ship's original grandeur, despite over a century underwater. The forward compartments flooded early, leading it to sink in a more controlled manner, descending with much of its structure preserved. In stark contrast, the stern is a mangled heap of twisted steel, barely recognizable as a ship. The last 200 feet of the vessel, including the aft decks, propellers, and rudder, are crushed and folded in on themselves. Decks have pancaked, steel plates bent at impossible angles, and the entire structure shows signs of immense crushing forces. For years, this damage was thought to be a result of the stern's violent impact with the ocean floor. The forensic investigation demonstrates that the destruction of the stern happened during its descent rather than from an external impact. The stern's hull collapsed because it contained trapped air, which made it vulnerable to the increasing water pressure that caused the entire structure to collapse like a crushed tin can. The explanation shows why the stern area of the ship experienced greater damage than the bow area, which remains in almost untouched condition. The wreck site has proven to be extremely difficult to explore. Human exploration faces obstacles from the combination of darkness, cold temperatures, and crushing pressures that create unpredictable currents. The first expeditions utilized manned submersibles and remote-operated vehicles to record brief site images, which resulted in incomplete coverage that blocked proper site mapping. The debris field between the two main wreck sections contains an extraordinary collection of objects, parts of the ship's structure, machinery, furniture, and personal belongings spilled across the seafloor. It provides a comprehensive account of how the ship broke apart and how destruction led to disarray. The complete understanding of debris and its distribution remained hidden until recent times. The wreck site contains physical evidence which demonstrates the major difficulties required for exploration and the valuable information which exists on the ocean floor. The divided wreck site consists of two sections which function as a forensic site that exhibits proof of stress and collapse while showing the effects of underwater changes throughout many years. As technology has advanced, so has our ability to unravel this underwater puzzle, leading to the latest and most detailed study of Titanic's remains ever attempted. Advanced scanning technology. In 2022, a new era of Titanic exploration began with a collaboration of deep-sea mapping experts, forensic engineers, and documentary producers launching an unprecedented survey. The objective was not merely to film or photograph, but to create a complete digital twin of the Titanic wreck with millimeter-level precision, a virtual replica accessible without descending thousands of meters into freezing darkness. This ambitious effort deployed remotely operated vehicles equipped with cutting-edge high-resolution cameras, laser scanners, and sonar systems. These ROVs operated in carefully planned overlapping patterns, capturing every accessible surface of the ship and debris field from multiple angles. Over several months and multiple expeditions, the team collected more than 700,000 georeferenced, time-stamped images. The advanced photogrammetry software processed data which exceeded 16 terabytes of information. The technology detected identical elements which appeared in more than 1,000 photographs to create a complete three-dimensional model. Researchers gained access to a digital twin which contained information about rivets and deck plates and structural damage and debris distribution with exceptional detail. The scientific community now possesses technology which enables them to virtually explore the Titanic wreck site, while they investigate detailed features which previously needed deep-sea research for examination. They can use the model to examine specific damage by rotating it and conducting structural failure analysis, which treats the wreck as a forensic crime scene instead of an ancient underwater artifact. The digital twin maintains the site in its present condition while it establishes permanent documentation of the site, before natural processes begin to destroy it. The system enables researchers to conduct their studies while they avoid the hazards and high costs of underwater research trips. The new technology which emerged from this development enables researchers to study Titanic research at levels which permit engineering experts and historians and family members to learn about the ship's final journey. The system establishes a connection which enables people to experience the wreck's terrifying reality from locations far away. Having built this detailed digital map, the stark differences between the bow and stern sections become even more apparent, revealing clues about their diverging fates during the sinking. Bow versus stern condition. The bow section of the Titanic rests upright on the ocean floor, tilted just slightly to port, and remarkably well preserved after more than a century underwater. This first 450 feet of the ship still shows detailed elements like railings, anchors, and even recognizable parts of the bridge. Despite the rust and decay from decades beneath the waves, it's almost majestic, a haunting reminder of the ship's original grandeur and the tragedy that unfolded above. The flooding was concentrated in the forward compartments early on, causing the bow to settle steadily as it descended. In stark contrast, the stern tells a far different, much darker story. This rear portion of the ship, roughly 200 feet, including the propellers, rudder, and poop deck, lies in ruins, twisted and crushed beyond easy recognition. Decks have collapsed, steel plates bent at impossible angles, and the entire structure seems compressed and shattered, as if subjected to a colossal force. For years, researchers attributed this devastation to the impact of the stern hitting the seafloor after the ship broke apart. However, the detailed three-dimensional scans revealed a different truth. The stern's damage wasn't from an abrupt collision, but from a destructive process that unfolded as it sank. Air trapped inside damaged compartments caused it to implode under the crushing pressure of the deep ocean, folding decks inward and crushing compartments much like a tin can squeezed under immense force. This explained the immense difference in damage between the stern's twisted wreckage and the bow's comparatively intact structure. The scan data allowed experts to analyze the debris field between the bow and stern, finding thousands of scattered pieces of the ship's structure, hull plates, deck beams, machinery, and even personal objects. By mapping their positions and orientations precisely, the team could reconstruct the ship's gradual breakup, rather than a single catastrophic event. This revealed the complexities of how structural failure rippled through Titanic in its final moments. The bow and stern sections of Titanic wreckage describe its final descent, because the bow section descended intact through controlled sinking, while the stern section collapsed through violent failure during its descent. The physical wreckage of the ship sustained damage through this partition, which affected the way people understood the ship's narrative. The two sections show different characteristics which demonstrate the sinking ship's operational forces. The bow section maintained its basic structure, but experienced extensive internal flooding, which proved that Titanic would sink. The object maintained its original structure until it reached complete destruction when it hit the ocean floor. The stern section became unstable because its structure broke apart, while foreign material entered its space, and the rising water pressure caused total destruction during its descent. The examination of both sections together demonstrates how natural elements interacted with human-built structures, because it shows how engineering boundaries became exceeded through ocean pressure that altered the wreck. The deep ocean holds a story about human strength that shows both weak points and strong points of our character. The bow section stands upright, which creates a final dignified position, while the stern section shows its broken body from the violent descent process. The two elements create a complex, tragic situation because it contains more details than people typically expect from a divided situation. The ship experienced a failure because the dual operation of its systems created two separate ways for the ship to lose its structural strength. Understanding the preserved and destroyed elements of the wreck sets up a closer look at what actually caused the ship to fail structurally over time beyond the initial iceberg impact. Progressive structural failure. Titanic's breakup was a slow, torturous process rather than a single, sudden fracture. The advanced scans show that the ship's keel began to bend under the strain of its own weight as the bow filled with water and sank while the stern rose out of the ocean. This twisting motion placed enormous stress on the ship's middle section, particularly near structural expansion joints that were designed only to flex with waves, not to handle such extreme angles. As the sinking progressed, plates on the hull started separating, rivets popped, and decks tore apart one by one. This cascading failure spread both forwards and backwards from the keel, causing the ship's structural elements to fold, bend, and eventually come apart. It was not a clean break. It was a slow unraveling played out over several intense minutes. Survivors in lifeboats described seeing the ship bend dramatically in the middle before finally breaking, and for years their accounts were dismissed as unreliable or exaggerated. Now, the forensic evidence confirms their memories were accurate. The ship twisted and tore with terrible violence, accompanied by sounds that survivors heard as explosions or snapping metal. This progressive failure turned Titanic's elegant steel body into a fragmented and mangled mass under unbearable tensions. The vessel, despite its state-of-the-art design for 1912, was overwhelmed by forces its engineers never anticipated. Forces generated by the unusual situation of half the ship underwater and the other half held aloft. The damage patterns on wreckage support this understanding. Hull plates bent outward instead of cleanly sheared, deck structures pulled apart rather than snapped, and the keel was twisted before separation. The ship partially collapsed inward on itself before fully breaking into the two main pieces now scattered on the ocean floor. This catastrophic structural failure was in part a tragic consequence of Titanic's rigid design. Features like the double bottom and watertight bulkheads were intended as safety measures, but instead became points of concentrated stress when the ship bent beyond its limits. The strong, inflexible keel transferred enormous forces through the hull, accelerating its breakup. When the bow finally separated and began its descent, the stern temporarily settled back in the water, as survivors reported, before beginning its own doomed plunge. The sinking became a dynamic, violent dance of steel under pressure, far more complex than the imagery of a simple snap suggests. This gradual collapse reveals why so many individual pieces of wreckage lie scattered across miles of seafloor debris, telling a story of repeated failures and internal collapses rather than one violent fracture. It also underscores the profound dangers and unpredictability faced by the ship's crew and passengers during those final moments. This understanding of the progressive structural failure of Titanic encourages a reevaluation of not only the physical evidence, but also the human experiences on board, setting the stage for revealing the extraordinary role played by the ship's engineering crew. The engineering crew's role. One of the most astonishing revelations from the latest Titanic scans is the heroic role played by the ship's engineering crew during the disaster. Deep in the bowels of the ship, amid boiler rooms, engine rooms, and electrical generator spaces, men known as stokers, trimmers, engineers, electricians, and firemen stayed at their posts long after the iceberg struck. These were among the hottest, loudest, and most dangerous areas under the best of circumstances. That night, they turned into a furnace of rising water, steam, and impending doom. Despite the encroaching floodwaters, these men did not evacuate. Physical evidence from the wreck, a series of open steam valves, emergency rerouted electrical systems, and furnace doors positioned as if fires were being stoked, suggests a deliberate, sustained effort to keep Titanic's power operating. Emergency generators were kept running until the very last moment, as floodwaters threatened every system. This continuous operation was crucial for powering the lights, pumps, and vital communications that helped passengers and crew during evacuation. Why did they stay? For the engineering crew, abandoning their posts meant plunging the ship into darkness, risking mass panic and chaos. The lights illuminated the decks, allowing evacuation to proceed in an orderly way despite the night's terror. The pumps, although unable to stop flooding entirely, slowed the process, buying precious time. The wireless transmitters sent out distress signals that mobilized rescue efforts. Each of these functions depended on power maintained deep below deck. Testimonies from survivors frequently mention how the lights stayed on far longer than anyone expected, sometimes even as the ship was breaking apart. This seemed miraculous given the advancing flood and the ship's sharp tilt. Yet the forensic evidence now explains how this was possible. The engineering crew's refusal to abandon their stations prolonged the ship's operational capacity and saved lives. The fight between both sides in the engine rooms reached extreme violence. The men suffered from steam, which erupted from broken boilers after water flooded into the engine rooms. The combination of rising temperatures with oxygen depletion created conditions which became almost impossible to handle. The crew continued their work until the ocean water completed its destruction of the fires and shut down the power generators. The power systems experienced an immediate outage when flooding conditions exceeded their capacity, which proved that these men maintained their position until death. The surviving rate for the group turned out to be considerably lower than other people who served on board the ship. The engineering crew, which numbered approximately 325 members, lost 48 members who survived, which amounts to less than 15%. The general crew and passengers displayed better survival rates than this group. The chief engineer, Joseph Bell, organized the team operations, while Jonathan Shepard and Herbert Harvey, who were younger engineers, remained at their workstations despite water reaching waist level. The entire electrical system operation was William Farquharin's responsibility throughout the entire period. The public typically recognizes officers and courageous passengers, but the latest forensic findings have brought attention to the heroic sacrifice made by these men. Their hidden work, which they performed under the decks, provided essential support for the final hours of Titanic, which enabled the evacuation operation to continue through essential lighting, power, and communication systems. The crew's choices created a time delay, which resulted in the rescue of numerous individuals during that evening. The engineering crew's display of bravery and enduring hardships brings a deep element of human existence to the Titanic story. The failure of technology, coupled with the disaster, created human will and sacrifice as the defining factors which determined the disaster results. The story of the crew's endurance reveals not just bravery, but also highlights misconceptions about the nature of Titanic's damage. And that brings us to the iceberg's true impact. The iceberg damage revisited. For over 100 years, the common image of Titanic's iceberg collision has involved a massive, gaping hole torn in the hull, a long, continuous wedge allowing the ocean to flood in uncontrollably. Early theories and popular depictions pictured a dramatic breach that doomed the ship instantly. But the latest three-dimensional scans paint a much darker, more insidious picture. The iceberg inflicted a series of thin, scattered slits and separations rather than one colossal wound. This death by 1,000 cuts shattered 6 watertight compartments as hull plates pulled apart and rivets popped under impacts. These slits were narrow, sometimes just inches wide, but their cumulative effect was devastating. Titanic's design was reputedly capable of surviving flooding in up to 4 compartments, with watertight bulkheads isolating damage. The iceberg's breaches far exceeded this margin, dooming the ship early on. The ship's watertight bulkheads were strong and effective barriers against localized flooding. but they were not engineered to withstand the progressive flooding and bending forces that developed when water spilled from one compartment to the next. As the bow sank lower, water gradually spilled over bulkheads into succeeding compartments, an irreversible cascade sealing Titanic's fate. The ice damage wasn't a sudden, catastrophic rupture. It was precise and surgical. The thin slits and multiple breaches created structural vulnerabilities that, combined with flooding, stressed the ship's rigid framework to breaking point. The scans revealed that Titanic's safety features, including the double-bottom hull and subdivided compartments, contributed ironically to its catastrophic failure. The ship experienced flooding at different rates, which changed how weight was distributed throughout the vessel. The bow section sank because it carried thousands of tons of water, whereas the stern section kept floating because most of it remained undamaged. The midsection of the structure experienced extreme bending forces because it served as the most vulnerable area, which scientists had determined to be safe from the pressure that expansion joints would face. The Titanic's hull structure became a prisoner of its own powerful design. The ship's rigid keel and its reinforced bulkheads together created concentrated stress points, which caused the ship to collapse progressively. The ship's advanced engineering failed to handle the complicated forces which appeared on that night because its structure used inflexible components. The Iceberg damage investigation provides evidence that demonstrates the design limitations which existed in early 20th century ship construction methods. The Titanic ship designers created advanced safety systems for their ship. Yet original engineering methods failed to provide engineers with complete knowledge of how structures would collapse during extreme operational situations. Forensic research confirms authentic survivor accounts, which have faced suspicion and rejection throughout history. The eyewitnesses reported their observations about the ship's destruction, which included its lights extinguishing one section at a time and its stern rising before it finally sank. The physical evidence from the site supports their recollections, which demonstrate why survivor accounts hold essential significance. The disaster sequence followed its particular course because of the iceberg's actual impact, which created a situation that caused the ship to break apart at a slow but steady pace. The engineering disaster demonstrates both technological constraints and the personal stories that relate to this disaster. This deeper knowledge not only illuminates the ship's end, but prepares us to explore the human artifacts and legacy that endure on the ocean floor today. The human story and legacy. Beneath the cold, dark waters where Titanic rests, the latest scans have not only revealed steel and structure, but also countless personal artifacts that tell deeply human stories. Shoes, often found in pairs, mark where passengers and crew once lay. Delicate teacups, scattered dishes, and trunks spilling their contents transform the wreck from a site of engineering failure into a haunting memorial frozen in time. Each object echoes the lives interrupted by disaster. Among these possessions are poignant reminders of the individuals aboard: children's toys, stopped pocket watches, pieces of jewelry, and buttons from clothing, all captured with millimeter precision in the digital twin. Seeing these artifacts in their original positions gives a vivid sense of the tragedy's scale and intimacy. The wreck ceases to be just metal corroding on the seafloor and becomes a graveyard of memories and hopes. Titanic was more than a ship. It was a crossroads of people from vastly different backgrounds, from first-class passengers enjoying luxury to third-class immigrants chasing new lives in America. From officers to crew members striving to earn a livelihood, each person had a story. Over 2 hours and 40 minutes, those stories intersected with fate beneath the Atlantic waves. The digital preservation of Titanic invites reflection not simply on the past, but on the fragility of human life and the complex dynamics of disaster. These scans honor victims and survivors alike by treating their resting place with forensic rigor and respect, preserving the site before nature erases it further. The iron-eating bacteria ravaging the wreck act as a relentless force, steadily degrading railing, staircases, and hull sections. The Titanic will exist as nothing more than rust and sediment after several decades have elapsed. The artifacts will be buried, and the physical evidence of what happened will likely vanish beneath the ocean floor. The digital twin maintains the wreck's narrative because it stores information which future generations will be able to access. The time capsule exists in a state which exists beyond the limits of physical decay. The new scans provide validation for survivor testimonies which official inquiries had previously doubted. The eyewitnesses confirmed precise details about the ship's gradual breakage, and the light's staged flickering, and the stern's brief rise. The restoration of credibility shows that eyewitness accounts from disasters should be viewed as valuable evidence which records historical events. The Titanic story, through this lens, moves from myth and movie spectacle toward a forensic case study. The study demonstrates three main areas of research, which include engineering flaws, human reactions to extreme pressure, and the thin line which exists between life and death. The wreck becomes both an educational space and a memorial, which teaches essential lessons while paying tribute to actual individuals. The scans have produced more answers, yet they have created additional inquiries. The missing middle section, disputed sequences of failure, and never-answered what-ifs about speed, lookout equipment, and rescue attempts keep the mystery alive. Better technology will eventually provide clearer answers to these inquiries. The voyage of discovery shows us that Titanic's legacy continues to unfold as a current historical process. The digital record protects the message and memory of the physical wreck, which will eventually vanish, thus securing the memory of a tragic event that happened underwater for all time. The lessons learned from Titanic's tragic end are not just about the limitations of human engineering, but about the resilience of the human spirit. The stories of survival, loss, and heroism continue to resonate through the ages. They remind us that each life, no matter how small or fleeting, contributes to the larger narrative of our collective history. In this way, Titanic's legacy is more than just a maritime disaster. It's a testament to our unyielding quest for answers and the timeless impact of remembering those who came before us. Through the technology that preserves the wreck, we ensure that the voices of the past are never forgotten, and that their stories continue to guide and inspire future generations. Titanic's latest scans have rewritten history, revealing slow collapse, heroic sacrifice, and 1,000 silent stories beneath the sea. This tale of engineering, human courage, and tragedy reminds us why truth matters. If you found this revealing, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into history's mysteries.